Offer sheet compensation has been changed in the NHL, and last season we learned that it can pay off to sign players from other teams. In this video, I'm going to take a deep dive into who the Bruins might look at and why it could be an option for them this offseason. So buckle up, Bruins fans. I'm here to give you the latest info on your beloved Boston Bruins. If you've been liking my Bruins content, please leave me a like and subscribe. If you've already done so, thank you, and let's get into it. I've already done a deep dive on Matthew Knies and why I think he's a great hockey player, and why at the time when I thought the Bruins should sign him to an offer sheet. I've changed my mind on that. After the Leafs locker room cleanout the other day, some things became clearer about him and the possibility of an offer sheet. Mitch Marner is not coming back to the Toronto Maple Leafs, which means they will have more than enough cap space to sign Matthew Knies. Knies was asked about the possibility of an offer sheet, and he said he wants to play in Toronto. He said it over and over again, and from what I can see right there, he doesn't want to go anywhere, and I don't think he's going to use the offer sheet as leverage to get a better deal out of the Leafs. Knies was one of the few bright spots for the Leafs in the playoffs, and I have no doubt he is their number one priority to sign this offseason, and a deal will get done. Now that he's out of the way, there are a lot of options for the Bruins this offseason to get some pretty good players. Ty Anderson from Sports Hub was kind enough to put a great list together, which I will leave a link down in the description down below. When going over Ty's list, I will look at the cap situation of that team because I feel it plays a big role in even the possibility of an offer sheet. I will use BenchRate's webpage that depicts player salaries to judge what the compensation could be if the Bruins would sign these guys. Let's go over the compensation first and why I think the Bruins will look at offer sheets as a possibility. I'm not saying they will 100% do offer sheets, but I'm just saying they'd be stupid not to look into that with some of these players being available. Especially because what St. Louis did last offseason, because Edmonton was so high up into the cap, there was nothing they could do, and they couldn't match St. Louis's offers, which weren't that high. The new compensation is as follows. If the annual AAV is under 1.5 million, there's a bigger number there, but it's 1.5 million just to be easier in the video. The compensation is nothing, and the signing team owes the other team no compensation. If the AAV is between 1.5 million and just over 2.3 million, the compensation is a third round pick. If the player gets an AAV of between 2.3 million and 4.6, it's a second round pick. If the player gets in between 4.6 and 7 million, the compensation is a first and a third round pick. If the salary is in between 7 and a little over 9, the compensation is a first, second, and a third. I was rounding the numbers, but you should see the compensation chart on the screen for more accurate numbers, and you can see the higher AAVs and what the compensation is as well. I don't think any player I talk about today will have any higher AAV than what I've already said, so I'm not going to even talk about those numbers. The Boston Bruins miraculously have all of their picks they would need for the next upcoming season, and then some. Now, there is one stipulation, though, that they have to use their own draft picks and not ones that they've acquired in trade if they did an offer sheet for compensation. If the Bruins were to entertain an offer sheet, they would have to weigh the cost versus the reward. St. Louis was able to give nothing higher than a second round pick to Edmonton, which made their signings make a heck of a lot of sense. And those players were huge for them last year. Some GMs, and fans for that matter, frown upon offer sheet tactic, but I see no issue with it. Each team has a cap, and if they choose to spend to that cap and have not enough to sign other players, then I see no issue with other teams taking advantage of bad GMing. So let's go over Ty's list, which includes only 7 players, and none are named Matthew Knies. The first player Ty mentions is Koulie from the New York Rangers. Koulie is 6'3", 212-pound left winger who in 82 games last season scored 20 goals and added 25 helpers for 45 points. He's currently playing for Team Canada at the World Championship and looks very strong out there. In 7 games at the World Championship, he has 2 goals and 2 assists. He's a power forward that can score and forecheck. He was second on the Rangers in even strength goals and was near the top of the league with hits at 301. He has a deceptive speed and has great hands around the net. A player like Koulie is something the Bruins desperately need and I would think would become a fan favorite very quickly. I have mentioned these same sort of skills about Knies before, and Koulie is right up there with him with his size, strength, and scoring ability, and I would think he wouldn't cost as much as Knies. Koulie is currently making $828,000 a year, and BenchRates predicts his salary to be around $5.1 million next year. That would put his compensation in the first and third round pick category. The New York Rangers currently only have $8.4 million in cap space going into next season, and still have to sign K'Andre Miller to a new contract, and he will be looking for a sizable raise, along with some other bench players. Miller is predicted to get a new deal just south of $4 million, which wouldn't leave the Rangers with a lot of wiggle room, but they could move some pieces out to make the room. But a smart team wouldn't give him time to do so and make Koulie an offer sheet he can't refute. The Rangers also have Artemi Panarin set to become a UFA in 2026-27, and I would think he would like to be extended in the New York Rangers, and he's going to be getting a huge raise from the $11 million a year he's making right now. Koulie could be a prime example, like what St. Louis did last year, of a signing of a guy that his current team just can't afford his raise and still stay competitive. A first in 2027 could be a little too much for the Bruins that they're willing to suspend, because that's the McKenna draft. And what if the Bruins sign Koulie and don't think they're going to make the playoffs here? This could come back to bite them. A first in 2027 could be a little too much, though, than the Bruins are willing to spend. But Koulie would shore up the left side in the top six that has been vacant since Jake DeBrusk was able to walk for nothing. The issue I'm talking about here is if the Bruins signing Koulie, they don't think that that's actually going to put him in a playoff spot, then they might not want to do it, because a top 10 pick next year could actually move up to first and you could get McKenna. And you don't want to be the team that trades away that pick. Next on Ty's list is Luke Evangelista on the Nashville Predators, who is another winger who would slot into that second line right wing spot in Boston. He's 6 foot, 183 pounds, and in 68 games with the struggling Nashville Predators, he notched 10 goals and 22 assists. He doesn't exactly scream line the brink truck up for him, and Bench Rates has his anticipated salary at around $3.2 million next season. Not a huge price, but he'd cost any team a second-round pick. He has some speed and skill, but he's a little snake-bitten last season when many thought he'd be taking a big step. He scored 16 goals the previous season, but NHL fans know the Nashville Predators were bad last season and couldn't get anything going. Nashville, though, has a ton of cap space going into next season with $17 million, so I can't see a reason why they can't make this work or at least match any offer from any team. I'm not saying the Bruins couldn't use a player like him, but I just don't see how this one will happen. The next on this list is Kaapo Kakko of the Seattle Kraken. Kakko is 6'1", 212-pound, former second overall pick from the New York Rangers that fell out of favor last season. I think because they knew they couldn't re-sign him. In 79 games last season, he scored 14 goals and got 30 assists for 44 points. In 2022-23, Kakko was able to score 18 goals and notch 22 assists for 40 points, but he hasn't been able to replicate that success. There was a lot of hype around Kakko with regards to his two-way game before he was drafted, but the only thing he's been able to transfer to the NHL has been his defensive stick. Kakko isn't fast by any means, and with the Bruins needing scoring, I don't see the fit with Kakko in the Bruins' bottom six because it's so full at the moment. His predicted salary for next season would come in around $4.1 million per, making compensation a second-round pick. The Bruins had a ton of luck over the years, and I think keeping their second-round pick makes a lot more sense than offer-sheeting Kakko. The Kraken also have $21 million in cap space, so signing Kakko would pose no problem to them. The next on this list is Ryan McLeod, who is the first center on the list. He is currently playing for the Buffalo Sabres and listed at 6'3", 188 pounds. In 79 games with the Sabres, he scored 20 goals and got 33 assists for 53 points. I still don't know what the Oilers were thinking about when they traded McLeod last season. I would think he would fit rather nicely into their lineup right now. For his size, McLeod can skate like the wind and has a very strong two-way game. He provides scoring punch and would instantly become the Bruins' second-line center. I think McLeod would be amazing and would fit nicely to the Bruins roster, but Buffalo has $21.4 million in cap space next season, and I would think McLeod would be high on their list to re-sign. Buffalo is intriguing because they also have to re-sign Bo Byron. He's also in trade rumors right now, JJ Peterka, and Jack Quinn. With McLeod, they might not have enough cap space, as Bench Rates has McLeod coming in around $6.3 million AAV next season on the high end, or $5 million on the low end. That puts him as a first and a third for compensation. Is McLeod worth that? Maybe, because he certainly would solidify that second-line center role in Boston, and unfortunately would make Casey Middlestat the odd man out. I have a hard time seeing a world where Buffalo doesn't get this deal done and signs him long-term. You don't let players like McLeod leave your organization after having such a great season on a very bad Buffalo Sabres team. With McLeod, just like I mentioned with Koulie, you'd have to ask yourself, does that make you good enough to make the playoffs next season? Because if he doesn't, you just don't do it. Next year's draft is supposed to be a very good year, and the Bruins' first-round pick could be a top 10 pick. The next player on that list is Mason McTavish, who a player I think is amazing. I would love on the Bruins, so that is why I think it just is never going to happen. The 6-foot left-shot center is only 183 pounds, but he can skate like the wind. In 76 games with the Ducks last season, he scored 22 goals and got 30 assists for 52 points. He's only 22. He has only gotten better every year in the league, and I would think he's the cornerstone piece for the Anaheim Ducks. I'm actually very surprised they haven't re-signed him, given they have $38.6 million in cap space next season. Ty does point out in his article that the Ducks have a ton of future talent. They will need contracts coming up, but I think they could easily move Trevor Zegras and keep Mason McTavish if future salaries are that big of an issue. I would have McTavish over Zegras any day, and I would think Pat Verbeek, the GM, thinks the exact same. On the high end, Bench Rates has his next deal at 5.8, and on the low end, it's 3.9 per season, which is very reasonable, and I think later on would be a steal of a contract. Compensation would put him in either a second round pick or a first and a third territory, and that is where it scares me just a little bit if I'm Boston. If you can get him under 4.6 and Anaheim doesn't match, you're laughing, but I have my doubts that that would get the deal done. The last two guys on Ty's list, I just don't see as good options, as that is Dmitry Voranov from Columbus and Drew Helison from Anaheim. I'm not saying either player isn't great, but Columbus has $41 million in cap space, and yes, they have big names like Adam Fantilli coming up next year. I just don't see a reason for Columbus not able to re-sign him, and I feel the same way about Helison in Anaheim. Ty's list is great, and there are some great players on the list, and I highly recommend you read his article. I will say offer sheets rarely happen, but like anything in the NHL, when it works for one team, the next season, teams try and copy. It worked out very well for St. Louis last season, and with the cap being the way it is, I think it will become common practice for teams to use the offer sheet route, but I think they will try and stay away from any of them that requires giving up a first-round pick. I would love Will Koulie as a Boston Bruin, and I think out of all the players I spoke about, it has the most potential of working because of the cap issues the Rangers have. I still, unfortunately, don't know if the Bruins would take that risk. If they can get him in that $4.6 million range, he only costs you a second-round pick. So you do that deal in a heartbeat, but I doubt that gets the deal done. The Bruins wouldn't be the only team looking at him as well, and another team could see giving up a first as part of doing business. It's all something to think about, but I want to hear from you. Out of all the players I mentioned and what it would cost to get them, who would you want? That's a wrap on today's video. To stay up to date on all the news surrounding the Boston Bruins, please subscribe and drop me a like. If news breaks surrounding the Boston Bruins, be sure to check out the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you, and I'll see you next time.